Hi folks, so the Mavic Air, the good and the bad. Now, of course, generally, this is an amazing piece of kit. It's very compact and squeezes in an awful lot of tech into a very small frame. I think DJI have done a wonderful job at that. However, there are a few things I've discovered which, you may not have considered when you first looked at this as rather negative factors. So, I thought I'd make a quick video to cover some of them. I mean, I'll cover the good things too, but let's try and be as fair as we can on this. Some things are quite significant pros and cons, and some are, just little niggles which may not bother some people at all. The first thing, you've probably already heard from most people, is that this thing doesn't have anywhere near the same range as most of DJI's drones. It uses enhanced Wi-Fi. I say enhanced because apparently it's better than the Wi-Fi they use in the Spark. And it's nowhere near as good as its sister Mavic, the Mavic Pro, because it doesn't have OcuSync. The other thing you may have noticed if you don't live in the US is that it doesn't have FCC mode, which means basically a higher amplitude signal for a greater range. This isn't normally a huge problem for most people because you're flying this thing within line of sight, and this thing will easily fly within line of sight unless you've got massive Wi-Fi interference. So yeah, range, not as great as it could be, but that might not be your thing anyway. If you're flying within line of sight, it's not a problem. Now, another thing I've discovered, which I'd never found this in any other videos, and I did have a look at quite a few of them, is that the lens, I think there is, I've got an ND filter on here, but there is quite a bit of lens distortion. I noticed when I was panning around at altitude over a lake that there's quite a bit of lens distortion. It's quite, when you got that barrel distortion. It's certainly not fisheye, it's not that at all. But, it's quite pronounced, much more so, I've noticed, than my previous drones, the Phantom 3 and 4. This may not be a problem for most people again, but it's just something, I quite like. The rectilinear look that you get if it is a sort of either a decent lens or it does a decent amount of processing after it's filmed to make it look decent. However, regarding the camera, there's a few things about this as well. Now, this is a very well protected gimbal. It's very well housed within the actual chassis of the drone, which in terms of protection is a good thing. However, in terms of gimbal travel, this is a bit of a problem. A lot of people have called it a bug, but it's not a bug, it's not a software issue, it's a hardware issue. When this drone is flying along and it's tilting forwards, this camera tilts down, and it has to, otherwise it's going to be filming the top of the drone. Actually, if you turn on your video recording and you push that camera up, you will end up seeing the front of the drone. So in order to stop this, DJI have incorporated a feature where the gimbal will travel down before the front of the drone comes into view. Now, some people have said, well, actually, how about they just have it limited to that place? Which, kind of makes sense. That would make sense. But then you'd have a physical limit where the camera pitch kept going up and down with the drone, which I think would be a terrible thing. So they have elected just to have a sort of software push it down so it's just out of reach. But it's a problem because apparently you get this issue on the Mavic 2. Allegedly, some people have said it does happen, although much less so. But in sports mode, flying forwards, you are going to get your camera tilting down if you are facing the camera horizontally. So yeah, beware of that. That may be a factor. You don't get that at all, I've noticed, really, with any of the Phantoms, and much less so with the Mavic, from what I've heard, the Mavic Pro. Right. This thing's size, one of its selling points is that it's small, so it's really portable, and that's true. This is, so compact. You could stick this in your pocket. You can quite easily stick that in a bag, maybe an inside jacket pocket or something, and away you go. But there is a downside to this thing's size, because if, like you're supposed to in many countries, you're flying visual line of sight, so you're keeping visual contact on this while you're flying it, this very rapidly becomes invisible, which can be a problem if you want to film something fairly far away but stay within, general flying regulations of most countries. You will not be able to do it with this. I have actually kept my Phantom 4 for certain things because, you know, if I want to film something or fly with a certain amount of range, this isn't so great. The whole thing about the signal, that's not a problem. People say my Mavic Air is rubbish at flying long distance. Well, that's only really if you want to fly beyond line of sight. If you're staying within that general regulation, you won't have a problem. What you might have a problem with is that this is so small you can't go as far as you'd like with, say, a bigger drone. So obviously, yes, size for portability, can't match it. It's almost unparalleled in terms of what it offers at this size. In terms of, you know, being able to see it, I've actually looked into getting some LED lights. I've seen other people who've done this to make this thing much more visible when it's far away, either with a certain kind of background. It's easy to see without them, without the LEDs, or a dark background. You would need LEDs. Most people seem to put them on the bottom. I think I would probably stick mine on the top and the bottom. Get two, maybe a green and red one. So at least then you could tell which side was looking toward you, or facing most toward you. Another thing about this, the battery has been totally changed from the Mavic Pro design. The Mavic Pro design, you put it on top, but people said they were having problems with the locking mechanism. So they've totally redone that for the Mavic Air, and they're so confident in it, they're willing to put the battery on the bottom, confident that it won't fall out. So that must be a fairly decent thing. Batteries. Now, with Phantoms or the Mavic Pro, you can, within the Go4 app, or the Go app, you can change the time taken for these batteries to discharge themselves. By default, that's set to about 10 days. If you leave these things in your bag, you don't touch it, you don't press the button, they will self-discharge to a level where they can be stored for long term. Because if you keep these things fully charged for long periods of time, it really isn't good for the lithium polymer inside them. It degrades and you'll have less capacity and less usage and less charges overall before they become useless. So it's a great idea, you know, making them self-discharge. With the Mavic Pro and the Phantoms, you can change the period of time before which these things will self-discharge. You can set this to a matter of a few days. I think sometimes it's a minimum of 5 days, a maximum of 10. These, you cannot change. These will discharge by themselves after 10 days. You can't set it any lower. I'm wondering why DJI have done this. It could be that, you know, it's just cheaper not to have that functionality in them at all. Or it could be there's no benefit perhaps to discharging these things earlier than 10 days. Because obviously they are lower capacity. It would be like, you know, for example, your mobile phone or anything else which has a lithium battery in it. If it's not got such a huge capacity, there's no need to bring them down to a storage charge. So maybe that's why they've done that. But either way, it's not a big thing, but it's something that would have been nice, you know. Right, we'll have a quick look at the controller. It's a great wee controller. Doesn't have the screen on the front like the Mavic Pro does, which in most instances won't be a huge downside to a lot of people. But however, if you're flying along and your app crashes, your phone battery dies, if you can't see your drone, obviously I suppose you really should be able to, but if you can't, unless you knew exactly which way it was facing, and you push the direction that you want to go to bring it back to yourself, really your only option is to press the return to home button, where it will, you know, ascend to its predetermined height and come back to pretty much where it thinks it took off from. With the Mavic Pro, you have a screen where you have a fair amount of telemetry telling you, you know, where it is, how far away it is, which way it's facing, and you could quite easily fly the Mavic Pro back to yourself without being able to see it and without having any of the Go apps open, or Lychee, or whatever you might want to use, any FPV app. At this one, you can't do that, but, you know, not a huge deal. It's a deal breaker for perhaps a lot of people that already own the Mavic Pro, because, you know, it's a step backwards, which is fine, you know. Not a huge deal for most people who've never owned a Mavic before, like myself. I've come from the Phantom family, had the Phantom 2, 3 and 4. I've still got the Phantom 4 because, as I say, there are quite a lot of good reasons to still have a bigger drone, I think anyway, for me. This thing is great in the sense that it's actually more portable because you know, you get the control sticks tuck away nicely in there. And, you know, this is a much lower profile than an ordinary controller. This will fit into the back of your drone pouch here. And of course it fits into the side of the Fly More bag that comes with it. Now, some people have said they've had a problem with these in that they're a bit fiddly. Sometimes a bit hard to get out, and they've dropped them, they've lost them. It does come with spare ones, just because, you know, DJI realised some people would. Now, me personally, it doesn't bother me hugely, but having come from Phantoms, where you can adjust the height of the sticks, it doesn't offer a huge advantage, but what I did discover is that instead of buying, you know, stick tops or longer sticks, which actually I can't find anyway, I did notice that the tops of these control sticks are really great. The teeth mesh into each other perfectly. So I thought to myself, how about gluing some together and see if they work? Now, I didn't try these on the stock ones because they're kind of decent ones, so I did buy some cheapy ones off eBay, I think it was, and I glued them together. This thing has a few advantages. Obviously the main one that I was after is that, you know, it offers slightly longer sticks. If you've got, I mean, I'm about 6 foot, so reasonable sized hands, and I quite like, you know, that amount of deflection and control to play with, rather than just, you know, smaller movements. You know, there's really nothing hugely advantageous. It's just, you know, if you can make life a bit easier, why not? And I think this does. This gives me much more precision control, I would say. Now, it turns out, the other added benefit of these things is, you'll see I've taken the rubber off the top ones, just so it fits better when these bits close up over the controller. There's a rather nice added bonus to these things. They fit in there nicely, and even better, when you open them up, they angle them out for you, just like that. Maybe it's just the small things that amuse me, but that's just the cream on top of the cake, and it works for both, obviously. Now, there is one downside to these. If you've got these in here, you cannot close this thing if you have the cable controller down the side. You need to take that out before doing that little sort of idea. Not a problem for me because I use my Mavic Air with an iPad, so I'm using that port down there and have no need for that. But if you don't use a tablet and you use a phone, there's kind of no point you doing this unless you're happy to just put these somewhere separate in your bag, because you will not be able to close that in there, because look, see, the stick comes that far out, and that will push against that part of the mini cable and probably damage it, or maybe even your little bracket there, I don't know, but that's just something to consider before even attempting that. Other things this thing perhaps lacks. Phantoms and the Mavic Pro have a wheel for pitch like that does. They also have a wheel here for camera settings. You can change your ISO or other certain settings. You can assign that in certain ways. Similarly, there's normally 2 buttons here, C1 and C2, on Phantoms and Mavic Pros, which you can assign to whatever you want. So what they've done here, they've replaced this wheel with one assignable button. Me personally, I use that for auto exposure control. The other thing, I could be wrong on this, so feel free to correct me in the comments, but the Mavic Air controller is lacking an antenna, a GPS antenna I think it might be, in the controller, because the Mavic Pro has the follow me function. The Mavic Air won't do follow me. It will do active tracking, where, you know, it'll track objects within the camera's field of view, but the Mavic Air will not do follow me. You know, if that's something you may have wanted to use, then you'll have to get the Mavic Pro. Now, of course, the Mavic Air does have quite a bit of extra functionality. There's various modes this thing will do. Some fairly gimmicky, but they'll give you hours of fun, like asteroid mode, where it flies up away from you to view like a mini planet 360 panorama. This as well, by itself, with no added image stitching software or, you know, flying functionality like Light-G, this will take and stitch its own 360 panoramas, which is great for social media. However, if you're hoping to make the best quality versions you can, I would say this isn't quite enough. I would say you would have to take more than the 25 standard pictures this takes, because you get, for example, on the horizon, you get a lot of white aberrations between all the different panned images. And for Lightroom, for example, I only take 50 images, and you get much less chromatic problems with the sky very often. Also, if you let this thing do the stitching of your images, it's not as perfect as, say, if you used your own app like PTGUI. That's what I use. It's a great little app and it stitches rather well, and you can fine-tune the stitching if it has any problems. If this has problems joining images, it just makes it blurry and you have no control. So great for social media, you know, if you're not looking too deeply at the detail. But if you want really good 360 panos, I would say get Lightroom, because it'll take more images and you'll have more control over the stitching later. Another thing, I've not seen this mentioned, but it's something that's bugged me quite a bit. You see when you fold that in, and you've got those there, this prop is fairly free to move just there. And what it does after some period of time is it starts to scratch. It's quite hard to see in this light, but there's a scratch there and a scratch here. It's very hard to see on that camera with a certain light, but looking with your actual eyes, it's actually rather pronounced. There are ways to counteract that. You can get a prop clamp which fits over there and stops these moving at all. But I would say even when you're just folding that in and out, you are going to get a bit of movement. So I'm not sure how useful that'll be, especially given they're already there, those scratches. And I'm not sure how much worse they'll get. Probably not much, but a slight design flaw, something that could have been considered, but never mind, it's not a huge thing. Most of these things are fairly insignificant, but you know, just things that annoy me a little bit and may annoy you even more, who knows. Another thing, with the Mavic Air, I'm not sure how typical this is of Mavic Airs or any Mavic in general, but it seems it has a very sensitive compass. With the Phantoms, I could do one decent calibration, probably, I don't know, even as little as once a year if I wasn't traveling about too much, and that'll be it, it'll be fine. This, however, pretty much asks me to do a calibration every single time, which can be a bit annoying when you want to just get up in the air quickly, you know, and it's telling you to do a compass calibration, and then as well as that, it's telling you it's failed a few. You do start to get a little bit annoyed with it. Now, I don't know if this is, as I say, this could just be common to me or where I've been flying, but I have seen a lot of people remarking that this seems to take a lot of calibrating for some reason. I don't know why. So, we'll finish on some good points. Compared to the Mavic Pro, for example, this gimbal cover is a vast improvement. It's so simple just to get on and off. Some people didn't realize in Mavic Pro you had to take your gimbal guard off before you fly. They thought, well, I can see through it and the camera can move. What's the problem? No, you're supposed to take it off. Some people suffered overheating cameras because it didn't take theirs off. This one's fairly obviously meant to come off because it's got blurred bit. If you leave this on, you won't be able to see hardly anything out of the camera. But it's great. It's much better design. Just simply fits in, clicks in, and that's you. Good to go. As I said, it's got a better battery locking design, I would say, anyway. Its weight and speed, it weighs less than pretty much, apart from the Spark, this is smaller and lighter and faster than a lot of other DJI drones, especially ones around this size. It's smaller than the Mavic Pro. It's faster, not much, but you know, every little helps. Faster than the Mavic Pro. This has sensors on the back, so if you're doing an active track session, this thing won't, as a lot of people have done, back itself into a tree. It's actually really good at spotting branches. I was flying near a tree which had just one tiny stick branch hanging out over a bit of water. Trees jump out at you. They're absolutely evil. But this thing, at least with the forward sensor, was very good at spotting a branch which was about, I don't know, maybe 5 meters in front of it. It came up on the screen, you know, it was detecting something, and I could tell I was nowhere near it, but this thing let me know, just in case, you know, I hadn't been aware. So it's very good at sensing things. The camera, it's better and it's not as good. This thing will shoot 100 megabytes per second, at 4K 30 FPS. So there's a bit more detail there that you could play with perhaps, but generally speaking, if you're watching this on any mobile device, tablet, whatever, you're not going to notice the benefit, especially when you consider that you've probably uploaded it to Facebook or YouTube anyway, which has compressed the living heck out of it. So your 100 megabytes was wasted. For big screens, yeah, you may notice it a little bit, a bit clearer, a bit nicer, sharper, I don't know, who knows. Some ways in which this is not as good a camera. The problems with it, I would say, is that, as I said, you don't have so much immediate control from the controller, and you don't get as many color profiles with this. With this, you've got 2 color settings, and you can't shoot D-Log, which is a nice raw format, which is great for, you know, changing things the way to look the way you'd like them to, and a bit more control, a bit more detail and shadows, all that sort of stuff. But, you know, some ways better, some ways not so much. It's up to you what you really prefer. Another great feature, of course, is that this thing has a built-in 8GB card. I'm sure most people who fly drones will say, yep, there was once a time where I left my SD card at home, I lost it, it was full, or it just broke. I would think most people have experienced that at some point. With this thing though, that's no longer a problem, because it's got 8GB built in. I'll give you, well, at least 10 minutes of 4K footage. Of course, much more at 1080, so that's no longer an issue. It's a nice little touch. I mean, some people have said, well, it's only 8GB. Well, yeah, it's not meant to be a replacement for an SD card. It's a backup for an SD card, which I think is a great touch. As I mentioned before, it has more flight modes, per se. It has some added functionality over the Mavic Pro. This has more gesture controls. For example, with the Mavic Pro, you have to sort of take off first with a controller, and then you can do the gesture controls. With this thing, you can, using the button on the back, you can just put it on the ground, push that, and the camera will look up at you from the ground and try and follow your hands, and you can take off, fly around, and land purely from gesture control. I've never tried it because that's not something I'm that interested in, but you know, that would be quite useful to some people if you just want to take this out on its own, no controller. For some reason you didn't even have your phone with you, you can still fly this. This thing's also very fast at taking panoramic pictures. It will just basically zip around, up, down, zip around, camera up, down, and it'll take a panorama in no time at all. There you go, that's my list of little things, good and bad, which contribute to this overall. If you have any questions, or you know, any sort of corrections that you think, or different opinions, let me know in the comments, and I'll try and get back to you if I can. Thanks for watching, take care.